Future. Okay. Hello, everybody. Here we are once again with Daniel Hummerdal. It's been a while since we were planning to have this conversation, but since we were able to set the dates, Daniel was really nice to set a date to have a conversation with us. So, Daniel, you are a well-known person for the Brazilian and the South America community, but for those who, my channel is really wide, so I want you to give a little bit of your background to them, just real fast, in order to start the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast, Hugo. So the story of how I ended up here, I guess, started with me training to become a commercial pilot. So that was in Sweden many years ago. I was flying a lot of Cessnas and Pipers, building hours, towing banners, and flying skydivers and all that. And so I was trying to build my hours to get a real pilot job, and I ended up taking a job as an accident investigator with the Swedish Civil Aviation Administration. And that's obviously where I became very interested in safety and in human factors. And I became so interested that I decided to go for a degree as a psychologist. So I retrained at the University of Linköping in Sweden. And then after 5 years of doing that, I moved, I did some studies in France, and then I ended up moving to Australia, where I got an opportunity to take all these ideas that I had studied around conversation, about listening to people, about understanding their worlds and so on, and put them into practice. I was working in mining and construction and eventually set up a consultancy. So I gradually ended up in a space which we call safety innovation, which is really about pushing the boundaries, being critical about the current, the status quo, but also creative about trying new things. That's the sort of time period where I started up safetydifferently.com, the website. That's where I started to meet all these lovely people who are like-minded and want to see change in how we think about people, how we think about work, and how we think about safety. So that set me on a very exciting route to work with people who've been doing that. I've been doing that as a consultant, both sort of an external consultant, but also an internal consultant. I was the head of innovation for the safety regulator in New Zealand for 6 years. And then a couple of years ago, we moved back to Australia, and been doing a lot of training around safety leadership and safety conversations ever since I came back here. And that's when I discovered that there was a need to have a more in-depth resource around safety conversation. It's one of those things that we do all the time, right? We're out there talking, but at best you can find some PDFs or there's some other resources out there. But I wanted to give my version of it. So I wrote a book, and that book was published a couple of months ago. It's called An Invitation to Safety Conversation. And then eventually that led me to do a webinar with your Safety Differently community in Brazil. And you suggested that I come on your podcast and take the opportunity to talk more in depth about me and the book and everything else.
Yeah, really. I think the website you started is one of the most famous worldwide, because it put together a lot of really nice and free information for everybody. I have the pleasure to be one of the I'm pretty sure the only member from South America in the Hop Hub website, that I think is also a good community and a source of resources. But we are gonna talk about the book as well. But first of all, I want to ask you, Daniel, we spend a lot of time trying to improve the questions we ask, and some of these questions I'm taking from your book. We spend a lot of time trying to improve the questions we ask workers, but what questions do you think we should ask? What question do you think that the organization should ask themselves? Like looking inside as an organization.
Very good. I think there is we'll talk a little bit about the specific questions, but if you look at the overarching question, just being very clear on what is it that we're trying to find out, what is the work that we're trying to do as an organization. So I would start with a question about what is really going on, what is the current state of things, what is the bigger messy reality of things, the things that we may not see or understand or have access to in that kind of way, because our measurements or our approved or traditional channels for information to flow, they filter things out and they may not reach all the way to decision makers. So just having this sort of discovery question in the back of our minds, I'm here to find out new things, to learn more, whatever that is, and be open-minded to what that is, rather than having a preset question or a limited view on what you should be learning about. Excuse me, Hugo. I got a bit of a leftover cold, so I'll have some coffee and we'll get back to the question. We have to edit this out.
Coffee as well.
Good. So the understanding the current state of safety, of work, what people experience at work, that is sort of the interest area, or one of the two. And then, of course, there's the second question, which is sort of connected to that, which is really, what are we going to do about that? Which is a question about what kind of future do we want to create? Because we come across problems, we come across good things, we come across broken relationships. We discover a lot of things when we go out there. And of course, it's nice to learn more things. It gives us a better calibration, but it also comes with a responsibility of actually doing something with that. So for our conversation, I think these are the main two avenues that we should be asking questions around. Number one, what is currently happening in our organization? And number two, what are we going to do about it? Now, with that in hand, there's lots of questions we can ask to try to get to the answers of those questions. I have my favorite questions, my go-to questions that I often start a conversation with. And there's a little bit of wisdom involved in why I use those questions when I start a conversation. Apart from introducing yourself and being a normal human being when you meet someone new, one of the first questions I start with is saying, if you had $50,000 to make this a better place to work, how would you spend it? So someone might say, I would probably do something around the lighting here. I would throw a big barbecue party, and we would do something around the tool store, right? So now the person has given you three things, has given you a menu, has sort of shaped the agenda with you. I'm ready to talk to you about these three things, which are the lighting, the barbecue party, and the tool situation. So then it's up to me to say, okay, well, tell me, what do you want to start with? Should we talk about the barbecue? And, just do it with people to sort of explore it with them and say, okay, what's going on with what problem would a barbecue party fix? Because, you can sort of intuitively understand if you improve lighting, it might improve working conditions. If you improve the tool situation, it might improve some of the safety stuff. But the barbecue party is a bit intriguing. How would a barbecue help anything? And there's a story in my book around this exact story, where someone said, you know what, with the redundancy that is happening at the moment in our organization, the team spirit is down the drain. No one is talking to anyone. Everyone is looking after themselves, but the team spirit is gone. I feel the most important thing we can do right now is to have, break some bread, eat some food together, and start talking to each other again and start caring about each other. And, I had no idea that this was going on, but just having this sort of helping, instead of me having a specific question that I was curious about, have an initial question, say, hey, what do you want to talk about today? How can we use this time? What's on your mind? How is work going today on a scale from 1 to 10? What's the best thing that's happening? What's the worst thing? What's the most interesting thing that's happening? Have a few different things to sort of take some samples about what work is like and allow people to guide you on what we should be exploring in this conversation, I think is is a good starting mindset when we start shaping questions.
Really, really nice.
Then if I, yeah, you go.
No, really nice, because I'm just wondering, in the past, not so long ago, but in the past, the companies was tending to ignore like uncertainty. We treated everything as linear, and everything that was seen as a problem was seen as something from the operators in the past. Then with the new view and these new theories, we started to understand uncertainty. But I think that now companies are trying to pursue safety by trying to reduce uncertainty. Yet real work is inherently uncertain. So how can we make people feel more comfortable with uncertainty without feeling that they are losing control? I don't know if maybe
it's a good question. To some degree, it's a question of who are we trying to make more comfortable with uncertainty? Is it the management, or is it the frontline workers? Because
in my question,
yeah, I think that I mean, there's lots of different. I have a few tools perhaps that I would use in that space. In my workshops, I draw a line, and I say, oh, if you put a mark on this line, on the left-hand side, you have work happens 100% by the book. The rules are followed all the time. There's no variability. There's no uncertainty. There's no surprise. Everything is according to schedule. On the other end of the spectrum, you have that work is full of surprise, variability. People have to adapt. So when I ask leaders, what's your view of the system that you're sitting on top of? How much does work happen by the book? How much does it happen, full of variations? And the first thing that happens is people realize that they don't see the world the same. Some people might say, well, maybe 10%. In our factories, might be 10%. And someone like, no, I've been to the factory. It's a lot more variability than that, because, the machinery, the equipment isn't working, so people have lots of different views. So as they start leaning into that, there's a question that pops up, which is, how do you know? Where is your knowledge coming from? And how could you know? How can you find the answers to these questions? And they realize that there's a need to spend more time with frontline, to spend more time in understanding how work actually plays out, because otherwise they're guessing. Yeah. So I think it's maybe a multi-stage rocket here. If we want people to become more comfortable with uncertainty, I think before that, they need to become more curious, to understand, to learn, to step away from their computer and the boardrooms and go and spend more time, and then discover that, well, it's a bit everywhere and you can't really escape it.
Talking about learning, but still thinking about the leadership, in your opinion, what distinguishes a leader who genuinely learns from people and learns from the field, from the frontline operators and mechanics, from a leader who simply collects information from them? Because it's becoming more popular, being open and psychological safety. It's kind of a brand currently. So,
it is.
But I see a lot of people only collecting information instead of learning from these opportunities.
Yes. Good question. I think leadership is such an interesting space to think about. There's so many different offers available of what leaders should be doing, about being, very clear and visible and strong, versus, being more servant leader and very touchy-feely, helping. Anyway, what I think it's interesting to think about here is that you can be your foundation, your justification for being leader can be different for different people. Some people become a leader because they are the technical expert on something.
Yeah,
they know
really
they have so
common.
much. It's quite traditional. you've come up through the ranks, and you've studied engineering, you understand the processes, and because you have so much knowledge in your head, you become a leader because you can guide the system towards that. Now, there's another type of leader which may not be the technical expert, but they have authority because they are positioned in the organization in such a way that they can make decisions, and people sort of have to follow them because they are, there's a lot of power connected to them as individuals. And if you operate on the technical expertise or the authority spectrum of leadership, then answers need to come from you. Then you're not really that interested in listening. You can do a little bit of consultation, but most of the time you have the answers, you have the decision. Why would you? There's no need to share that. But if you move into these sort of, it's less about you as a leader and it's more about us as a collective, then you need to start opening up. You need to start sharing expertise. You need to start sharing decision-making power and make it a we question. How can we improve this thing? If it's safety or a machinery or a process, whatever it is, then you become more of a coach. You become more about someone who's asking questions. Okay, so this process here, where does it start? Where does it end? What happens after? What's good about it? What's bad about it? It's more about being a host for knowledge, pulling in what people know, activating people to say, what they want to do to improve things, to coordinate, to edit the many contributions from people. But that's a different basis for operating. Rather than being on just the authority and the technical expertise. It doesn't exclude those things. You can still bring what your expertise into those discussions, but you're a participant like everyone else.
Yeah.
So just going back to what you said, I do think there is a bit of a trap with some of this. Leaders are supposed to be listening, and they're supposed to be, providing psychological safety. But then what? What do they do with that? Where does that go? And if you're asking people for their troubles and their ideas for how to make things better, and you do nothing with it, you normally breed cynicism and disappointment. People get very hopeful that things will change, but if you don't do anything with the things you've learned, you actually make things worse in many times. Nevertheless, it's really important to understand what is getting in the way of good performance, but then you need to do something with it. You need to start figuring out, do we need to remove friction? Do we need to put better solutions in place? There's a creative element so psychological safety is important, support is important, creativity is important for leaders to actually think that the system is not set. It's quite arbitrary why we've decided in this way. Let's explore some possibilities. That's a real leadership challenge right there, to think outside the current state, to think about possibilities. But then I also think that there's something here about expectations, about setting expectations, about being clear about what matters, to say, okay, I'm here to explore. I'm just not here to make you feel good. I'm here to explore why is it difficult to work to meet the expectations that we've set. So you can set whatever expectations you want, but you also have to be really passionate about creating changes to allow people to meet those expectations. So the leaders that I see, they're very good at setting expectations, but they're also really curious about what is holding performance back. How can I help people to step in there, and they engage people? They do this sort of safety with people. All right, that was a lot of talking. I'm not even sure I answered your questions, but I spoke about leaders.
You answered really.
Okay.
And I want to share an example. I was working with a company, and they have numerical KPIs for reporting stuff and for bringing people together and to capture information, and they always had really high numbers because they were not struggling, but they were working a lot in psychological safety. So the people were really bringing stuff and talking and reporting. And then I was there to help them to understand it. And then I talked to the safety people, and they said, okay, if I don't think we are improving because they just check the numbers. The leadership just checked the numbers. So I said, okay, let's do something. Next month, you're gonna report it by 1/4. So it was like 1,000 per month. We are gonna report 250 and see if they really care about the numbers. And they did. And then the leadership called them and said, hey, what's happening? What's happening to our numbers? And so I asked them, oh, what caught your attention? I said, oh, the number reduced. I said, but have you checked the 1,000 before? And he said, no, that's too much. So I said, what about checking the 250? He said, it is still too much. So I said, why do you keep the number high? If you don't have the capacity, the research to analyze each one of them, maybe the goal should be lower, and then you could do better stuff with lower numbers, looking for potential and everything. And they did. So they shift to a more qualitative stuff than just numbers, But that's not easy to do because companies get attracted to the numbers. Somehow it's important for them.
Nice. There's a chapter missing from my book. So there's something here about the we can call it the executive conversation. How do you, and this is a question I think many safety professionals, I don't know if they struggle with it, but are up against it every now and then, which is really around how do we engage the senior leaders of our organizations to engage in safety, and I think this is the purpose of that conversation, exactly what you just outlined, which is how do we move our executives from sort of managing safety from afar, from behind a desk, from behind the numbers? How can they get into the real stories and grow some tolerance for or curiosity for reality? And what you did is sort of you made the unit of analysis smaller and smaller until you end up in getting the nuances and the richness of lived experience, of the qualitative data or feedback from the organization, which is great. Obviously, it takes a bit more time. It's harder work. So I think it's important as well that sure, I see that we can, or maybe even should, be measuring certain things, but those measurements are just the starting points for further inquiry, for further questions into what is it like to work here, what is getting in the way of good work, and what can we do to make things better.
Daniel, you are a specialist on conversations. Is there a specific public that, considering the industrial, the professional context, that are harder to develop conversations, or it's just a human being characteristic? Daniel,
I am not. I'm not clear enough that there is a specific profession or age group or gender group, or it's quite open. I think it's more individual than that. I think the biggest problem, the biggest obstacle to good conversation is really ourselves as individuals, because we have so many preconceived ideas or biases around work or workers. We might have we might rely on our own expertise, because if you work on the same site for multiple years, after a while you think that I've seen it all. There's nothing new for me to learn here. I've spoken with everyone, I know everything. So you stop being curious, you stop giving attention to people, to processes, and you sort of become a bit more disconnected. So this work of having conversation means that you're giving your full attention to people that you're speaking with. You're understanding their unique perspective, their unique time, and you constantly have to realize that the quality of the conversation is not dictated by the person you're speaking with. It comes from the quality that you bring to the conversation, how much attention you give, how curious you can be, how compassionate you can be, how much you're ready to listen to be surprised. So you are the biggest obstacle, and I am the biggest obstacle to my own good conversations. Of course, some people might be, I'm thinking about a friend that I have. I don't think he gets conversation. Whenever we talk, we get together every now and then. He always goes on and telling some random story that I have not asked about, and he's never really asking me anything back. There's nothing of this sort of reciprocal thing. It all seems to be about him telling his thing. I just, every time I meet with him, I just scratch my head a little bit. You don't really get conversation, do you? So I agree. Some people may not be ready for it, or they might feel too uncertain, or they might need a little bit of hand holding. I don't think it's a particular group. There might be some individuals who are not raised in that kind of way. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I do think that everyone can get better at it.
Yeah, for sure. And people tell me that the reason that my podcast is successful is because I listen to people. I said, but this should be the basic, should be the normal stuff. If I'm asking people to come to talk, I should listen to them. I should give them space to talk, because and they say, oh, in other podcasts, the hoster talks more than the invitee. You know, I said, no, it's not my case. But I want to ask you about, still on conversations. Do you think that, because we were talking and I was thinking about my personal example, when you go up in the career, in the positions, there are two phenomena, at least that I can identify. One, people start to react to you in a different way for no reason. They see you as a big boss or something like this, so they try to keep a distance. And on the other hand, you somehow get in a storm of bosses asking you for reports and everything. It's like, it's not unintentionally, you are going to making a distance from the operators and from the shop floor. Have you realized something like this, or just something specific that happened to me?
Yeah, no, that happens everywhere. If we start with the first question around how, I guess, the power distance or the power dynamics, when you become more senior in the organization,
Yeah.
people start treating you a little bit differently because they, I don't know, you have a greater say in their future or whatever the reason is.
Yeah.
Now, it's a real thing. It happens, but it's also very, you can quite easily overcome that. It just sets the stage for how you introduce or how you connect as individuals. If you sit down and you start showing up as a normal human being, as I call it, being interested in people, that fades relatively quickly. But then it's also a little bit more fragile. You can quite easily ruin that if you have a bit more authority and you say a few things and then you have to start over again. But the point is that everyone is starting with a point of difference, and that's what makes it conversation so interesting, that we have different perspectives and we all have to overcome things. I'm from Sweden originally. I work in Australia. I'm a psychologist. I'm not a blue collar worker. I have, so every time I meet people, I have to sort of overcome this. I need to build a bridge where information can travel. And I think it's the same for everyone, depending on your ethnic group or your gender or whatever it is. There's a lot of things that shape people's preconceived meaning or ideas of what should happen in conversation, but it's all, you can overcome it. Now, the other thing that happens is that people start, did you say that they drift away from reality? They become more around reports and yeah, that's a real thing. And it requires quite an active decision to stay involved. There's a beautiful TV show, not sure what channel it's on, but it's Undercover Boss. I often talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
Example of how...
We have a Brazilian
right.
version.
Good. So it's about the boss going out and discovering reality away from the boardrooms, away from the reports and so on. And beautiful things come out of that. Another Brazilian company, I think Semco is a Brazilian company. He had, I think, 2 chairs at every board meeting where any employees could join. he wanted to have Ricardo Semler wanted to have the frontline voice in the boardroom. So he invited frontline to the boardroom rather than the boardroom to the frontline, right? Which is a different way. I'm not entirely sure how well it worked, but it's a different way of staying, having your fingers on the pulse. The former chief executive of Air New Zealand, he spent 1 day a week doing normal work of, manning the check-in desks or being the cabin crew on the aircraft and so on. So there's lots of different ways that can help you to overcome this. But if you have to do it actively, you have to invite it in, you have to step into this reality of work. Just remember, that's where the real stuff happens.
Yeah, that's something that every opportunity that I have, I try to remember people about it. Daniel, when you wrote your book, who were you thinking of? So who do you think would be the readers for
Yeah.
the book?
I think I started with a particular audience in mind, and once the book was written, I realized that there was potentially a much bigger audience for it. But so most of the people that I work with, they are operational leaders. They are so partly, some of them are obviously safety managers, but more of them are site managers or site engineers. So they are the clients that I normally have in my classroom when I teach, and that's where so a year and a half ago I had one group, and in the morning of the safety conversation day, I asked a question on one of those Menti, you measure things live in the classroom, right? So on a scale from 1 to 5, how confident are you to go out and have conversations with employees or contractors around safety? And everyone, 30 people in the room, said 5. They were maximum confident to go out and talk to people about safety. And I was a bit confused because, well, why am I here? What can I teach you? But if you're so confident, but then we spent, yeah, well, yeah, I guess so. But the interesting thing then happened is that as the day went on, and I said, okay, here's a situation. You see someone who is, maybe not, there's a deviation in PPE or a tool or whatever it is. Right. How would you go up to this person? How would you start? How do you introduce yourself? What questions do you ask? How do you bring up the deviation? Where do you want to end up in your conversation? What's the end point? What is a good outcome from this? And, in those first 10 minutes when people were just in a group, I realized that none of them approached this the same way. None of them had a systematic way of thinking, okay, I start here. I need to do this work first, and then I can arrive at this. And this is actually the good thing. They might feel very confident in, saying, hey, who's your supervisor? You shouldn't be using that tool. But then I said, well, okay, you can do that. But what actually changes as a result? When you go around the corner, what has changed? So I discovered while people might feel confident, there was a lot of tricks and hacks and questions and mindsets that I could teach people. So I wrote a book for that sort of audience, people who are working actively on, close to work, for them to realize the potential that is sitting there. But as I kept writing, I realized that actually conversations, the moments that matter, where we learn things, that needs to travel. How do you travel? How do you make insights travel across the organization from you go out and you have a conversation with someone? How does that end up in the boardroom? So it's actually conversations, they happen at every level. They happen in, if we have performance conversations, review conversations, if we do incident investigations, if we do a risk assessment, it's all conversation, right? So now I think that I just see conversation is everywhere, and we can just become better and better at involving each other in decisions, in learning moments. So the audience now is potentially anyone who talks and works.
And how were you surprised in some of these workshops or interactions that you do with people with a particular area that is not safety related, that is applying the lessons from your book, like quality or maintenance? Was any situation like this? Because it's applicable to pretty much everybody that can speak and listen.
Yeah, exactly. So it's some of the insights that have come back from people that read the book, but also the people that I've gone through my training and that I've worked with through coaching programs and so on, is that, well, first of all, I think people need to build, they already have strengths in different areas, and they recognize, hey, I might actually want to become better at something else. Some of the most fun things coming out of it, or more interesting things, is where people realize that they need to be a bit more silent. They need to listen better. They just need to shut up for a while and let other people come on the frequency and share what they know. And it's an interesting journey how in the beginning they are so triggered by being quiet, by listening, by not leading, and allow, because it's a bit uncertain. If they're quiet, who's going to step up? What are they going to say? Where's this meeting going to go? But then they discover that when they go quiet, other people do step up and they say interesting things, and the meeting have much more energy, and it's more fun and interesting, and they become more confident again by stepping off their comfort zone. They become more comfortable as they grow into it, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, in Brazil we say that saying nothing, saying a lot. If you don't speak, people will speak up for you, and that could be worse than try to protect yourself. So it's a good lesson. Daniel, something that I wanna touch base with you is the HOP, human organizational performance, due to the past you had in a consultancy company. Have you seen some company that had HOP somehow implemented? Do you think it's a philosophy that can be implemented? Because there is a lot of criticism on, where is the practice about it? But on the other hand, if we compare HOP with the other, I would call brands from the new view, like Safety Differently, Safety 2, the most famous or the most adopted by companies are HOP. So there is a misunderstanding somehow in this. I want you to give your thoughts on this.
Yeah, there's certainly a big appetite for HOP out there.
Everywhere, not only.
It's worldwide.
Worldwide. Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear the stories coming out. And I've attended many HOP trainings to listen to participants, and I follow up with the organizations that are doing it as well. And while so let me start by saying that I think the main, not the main value, but I think what's underestimated is how disruptive HOP is, in the sense that there's something that comes before HOP, which is full of telling, commanding, blaming, and then people start talking about HOP. And it radically changes the discourse around how do we understand people, how do we understand organizations, how do we understand responsibility. And all of a sudden, people can talk about safety and blame and learning in a new way. HOP is a very powerful lens and language that it gives a license to organizations to be and to see safety in a new perspective that they haven't considered before. They may have considered individually, but when they go through a training, it becomes an organizational thing.
Yeah, never thought about that before.
Okay.
And this is pretty much instantaneously, since you learn, it starts making sense real fast. You could apply this on the other day if you will. You don't need any additional tool, just a different way of seeing things. So in this, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and then is, of course, from an implementation perspective, how far do you go in that, and how quickly can you move, and how big do you make it? But I do see that it can be really challenging for organizations to go down. I think it's really important that you bring all levels of the organization on your HOP journey or whatever perspective you have, because if that is not anchored from the executive to your supervisors and so on, it's gonna stop.
Yeah.
You can start small, but you need to scale it. You need to bring everyone with you. You need to give the license to everyone to talk about this in a new way. And when that happens, they can keep going for many years. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, totally agree. Daniel, we are heading to the end. I think time flies when we are talking with intelligent people, So I want you to give your portfolio, so how people can contact you. What are you offering in those workshops? If you want to talk a little bit about the book as well, feel free.
Certainly. Okay. Well, I would love to hear from anyone or connect with anyone who's interested in these ideas. And maybe the simplest way is LinkedIn these days. It's a phenomenal thing. All of a sudden, I did a webinar for your group in Brazil a few weeks ago, and now I have hundreds of Brazilians in my contact list, which is pretty cool. So full of Portuguese lessons, and I need to hit that convenient translate button. If you want to follow my work, I think a really neat way of doing it is go to safetyconversations.com. Safetyconversations, one word, .com. That's where you find information about my book. I have a weekly newsletter. Every week I send out some thoughts about the relevance and potential and tricks and lots of questions. Everything that we talked about here goes out in a weekly newsletter. You can subscribe to that, and it comes to you.
On the website?
On safetyconversations.com, it says newsletter at the top. Okay. You go there, you can read the past ones, you can subscribe and put your email address, and it just shows up free of charge in your inbox, and you get lots of thoughts. And also there's a contact page on the website where you can reach out to me directly as well. So yeah, there's also information where you can buy the book. It's available on Amazon. Starting to talk to a few people in Brazil about potentially translating it into Portuguese. It's going to take a few months. I'm not sure how quickly they can move, but it's exciting to see what could come out of that.
Great.
So the other thing that I do is, obviously I do a lot of training around these things. So if anyone is interested in having something done around safety conversations, or people working together, or engaging their leaders in understanding the value of being more curious and compassionate and courageous around work, I'm happy to assist. Again, go to safetyconversations.com or use LinkedIn to start a conversation. You never know where it's going to go. That's the exciting part with conversations.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you are surprised with all the love and the repercussion that your work is creating on the other side of the world. We are at least 24 hours away from each other. It's 8:15 p.m. here. So we are on the opposite. But go ahead.
It's lovely, and it's humbling to know that people on a different continent, on the other side of the planet, are enjoying the work that I'm doing here in Brisbane, Australia, and they're finding value in it, and it's triggering conversations between them in a different language. It makes me very proud and pleased to know that it has that value. So very good.
That's unbelievable, because with me happened the opposite. So you can see the booking on this direct. In English, it was people asking, "Hey Hugo, you wanna read your book? Please translate it to English." And I said, "What?" I think they were joking. I said, "No, send me and I will translate for you." So I said, "Oh," because we don't realize the reach that we can have when we do things with passion, you know. So congratulations on your work, and it's really valuable and really high quality. That's, I think it's a brand for you. You do things. I have the opportunity to read the newsletter, the book, and everything you do. The website is high quality stuff, and that's why you are succeeding. Congratulations on all your
Thank
work.
you very much, Hugo.
So thank you, Daniel. See you soon. I hope your book's gonna be available in Portuguese, and maybe we can see each other face to face somehow, somewhere, sometime.
I would love that. I would love it. Thank you for having me. It's been a
Bye bye.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.